as usual, you get the question, as I know Liz does, why are you running? And I'm running, I say, because I still believe that counties matter, that they're a really important part of government, and I'm really excited about the possibility of bringing trust and collaboration into the office of auditor. And I also recognize that there are lots of people who have no earthly idea of what the auditor does. It is really one of those misnomers from state law. We were created as a state back in the 1850s, and at the time, this particular office got tagged with being the auditor. But there really is no audit function per se within the auditor's office. State law does require every county to get an annual audit. And that annual audit is either done by the state through the state auditor's office, which is now Rob Sand, or they pay someone outside, like a Deloitte or an RMS, to come in and do their audit. So Linn County has always done their auditing function with an outside firm. It's always bid out. And years ago, before I was ever even on the Board of Supervisors, the Finance and Budget Office and the whole audit function moved under the Board of Supervisors. And that was actually at the request of then Auditor Linda Langenberg. So she said she thought that would be appropriate. So now we have 2 CPAs in the Budget and Finance Office. There's actually a position open. If you know of anyone who wants to do that kind of thing. Neil says no, he doesn't want to go back to work. Yeah, there you go. So, but what does the auditor do? So the auditor does, one of the big primary jobs is to serve as the commissioner of elections. And that is, in today's world, a very, very big job. And election security and cybersecurity issues are huge. One thing that people may not know is while I was in DC, one of the things that I did, partly because of the resilience work and the leadership work I did, I interfaced a fair amount with the National Advisory Council for the Department of Homeland Security on cybersecurity. And so a lot of the conversation really was about county governments and elections and what are the issues that we're facing. So I was one of the people providing them with information about what are the things we need. And actually one of the things we need is workforce. It's very hard for counties around the US to find qualified people to do IT and cybersecurity and keep them. Linn County is lucky because we're a larger county, so we don't have some of the same issues that smaller counties do. But I was talking to Senator Chris Coons when he was here as we were going through all the caucus land stuff, and one of his committees as a US Senator is actually working on cybersecurity. So he's working to make sure that there is enough money for local governments to ensure that our voting equipment and our voting processes are all secure. So that is one very significantly large part of the auditor's office. The other 2 things that are probably most well known would be all of the bill paying. So payroll and bills, accounts receivable is all done, and the auditor really serves as a management function overseeing the staff who do that. And the other big arena is the real estate tax division. So the auditor certifies the real estate tax portion, the GPS, the sort of this is the list. So a lot of developers and attorneys that have to work with their clients on real estate go through the auditor's office before those are then certified over to the treasurer's office. So if you ever wanted to know, whenever anybody asks the question about why can't government be more like a business, it would be because of the way we're set up, So there's one thing that happens in the auditor's office that has to go over to the treasurer's office that is linked to the recorder's office. So we do it across 3 different offices. In the end, you then get a tax bill, but it requires all 3 offices along with the assessor's office to work well together. That is what will lead to efficiency and effectiveness. And that is my goal. I have great relationships with Sharon Gonzalez, who's the treasurer, and Joan McCallum, who's the recorder. I've worked with the assessors both in Linn County and Cedar Rapids for many years. So that is a huge opportunity. And then, of course, part of that real estate tax division also gets certified ultimately so that schools and cities know what their tax bills are. So that's particularly important for the smaller cities. I don't want to minimize Cedar Rapids, but the Hiawatha, Robbins, Marion, Prairieburg, Central City, Bertram, Ely, they all have to have a number that is certified based on their real estate. And that is something that hasn't always gone well. We have a tax system that we've been working on since before the flood. But I think we are close now. One of the challenges of doing that is the fact that it's required, again, multiple offices to work well together to get it done. So my goal is really to bring this whole perspective of good management, collaboration, trust, so that people really are listening to one another to get to really more effective government. I want it to be very welcoming, so that if real estate attorneys are having a problem, or school boards are having a problem, they really feel like they can come in and get that done. We also have issues when it comes to elections. The reality is that we've made a lot of presumptions about why it is that people don't vote. And I don't know if people have actually looked at the pie chart of people who voted in the 2016 election, but it's a little bit scary because it was really, really close. You had about 62 million people who voted for President Trump. You had about 65 million people who voted for Hillary Clinton. And you had 91 million people who did not vote. And you had 10 million people who voted for a third-party candidate. 91 million people who did not vote. What is going on there? That, to me, is the nut that we have to crack. We have to understand, are people afraid to come vote? We certainly have issues with felons. Iowa, sadly, I know that Liz is on this, but we're one of the only states left who do not allow felons who have served their term to come back and vote. But we also have to understand, how do we engage with people in a way that makes them want to vote, that understand that it can be an engaging process. So I look at Kyle, I certainly look at Evan and Eric, because they're young enough to really think about, what is the world that you live in that you can get more of your friends to come vote? Now, like many, I was dragged along with my parents when they went to vote, and so that was how I learned to vote, because I went with them. But there are lots and lots of people who don't do that. Eric has a really good friend who never voted until she was 35, and she voted for the first time for Obama because she was inspired to vote. And then she decided to write a small little monograph called Me the People, because she was, arguably, I would say, shamed for not voting. And it wasn't apathy. And so she followed several, I encouraged her to follow some elected officials around, just to see what is it we do and why would you care. So she followed Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky around in Chicago. She followed me around here as a local official. She followed some state officials around, and she happens to live in Florida now. And her goal is really to educate people more about, this is voting. This is what it looks like. This is how you make a choice. And if you think about it, when you go to vote, you're confronted not just with a vote for president, which you've seen more commercials than you would ever want to see, but you also have to vote for all these things until in Iowa, in November, you'll also be looking at soil and water district commissioners that most people look at and say, who are these people and why? And I know Liz here said, I have heard it forever since I've been in elected office. Who among these people should I vote for? Because I don't know. Are there any judges I should say no to? Because people go in and they don't know what to do. They don't know, and so think about it. What happens when you don't know something? The thought of going to a place that you're not sure of, your polling place, that you've never been to before, to talk to people that you don't know, to do something you've never done before. What does that inspire in people? A lot of anxiety, and so a lot of people just say, great, I'm not going to do it. So I think we really have to think about this. We also have to do a whole lot better on college campuses in engaging not just with kids, but with administrations. And sadly, some state laws and some federal laws have been passed that make it really difficult for college students to vote, which to me could be remedied if the Commissioner of Elections were to sit down with college administrative staff. It could be solved very easily with a couple of changes in the college ID. And if you put those changes on the college ID, it would make it very easy for kids to vote. So then they can go in, they can prove that they're a resident of said residence hall, and it has a date on it. It has the requirements that are there on that ID, making it possible for them to vote. Instead of a time when I was at Coe College, one evening a few years ago, when we were having to awaken the housing administrator for Coe, because he was required to provide us with the housing contracts for students to prove that they lived on campus so that these kids could actually vote. Look, they are living somewhere for 4 years on a campus somewhere, and we should make it easy for them to vote. That we need kids to be in the habit of voting. So I think really looking at the research, the Knight Foundation has just released, that just at the beginning of the year, some fascinating research on why it is that people don't vote. And part of it is they don't get in the habit, they don't think about it, and they don't believe it's important. I used to talk to kids in town here that go to Bosch and Kennedy and Coe, and I'd ask people, are you planning on voting? Do you? And most kids were like, nah, why would I do that? Why would I care? And so I would say, well, how many of you have a part-time job? Virtually everybody's hand went up in class. How many, and I asked them whether if they were going to Iowa schools, Iowa State, University of Iowa, some local, Luther, Wartburg, Coe, and pretty much everybody, if they were in high school, was planning to go to an in-state school. I said, so now tell me, how many of you have parents that are going to pay for your entire college education? And all of a sudden, there were a lot of hands that went down, and maybe only about 10% had parents that were going to pay for everything. So I said, well, then I would suspect that the wages that you're making at your part-time job, those are going to be paying for your college. And if you're going to an in-state school, do you have any idea who sets the prices for tuition? Okay, these are kids that are getting ready to go to college, and they have no idea. They have no idea that state legislators, through the regions, sets the tuition. So I said, if you're concerned about how much you're paying for school, you need to vote, because these are the people who determine how much money you pay. And kids would always say, but no one ever told us this. No one said that this is the way that it went. And I said, well, I'm here today to tell you that. So if we don't engage with people, with young people, and help them do it, and one of the things that the Knight Foundation found, that in schools where they do projects, both in high school and in college, that foster that concept of cohort, kids vote. So we have to think about this differently, because to have 130 million people in this country who vote, wherever they vote, and have 90+ million people who don't, that's unacceptable. And so that's enough for me. That's my focus is really to do those things. So Robin, do you have a question?
Yes, Linda, that not only do people want to know why you're running, but those who are aware will know that there is an incumbent. And so they'll probably say, why should I vote for you?
Well, I think that part of what I indicated, I think I have a clear understanding of some of the issues that exist within the office, particularly related to voting and to cybersecurity. I know Joel indicated that I was an amateur in his fundraising letter. I don't believe that I am an amateur. I believe I have a good deal of experience working both with federal, state, and local elected officials to make sure that things get done. Most people also know that I am someone who listens well. The very first time I ran, I had my little campaign slogan was listening to all of Linn County. And I think it remains an important issue to listen to people, and I've heard from a number of folks in our community who don't feel like that is something that is going on in that office right now. So I believe that my skill sets, both in managing things, again, I've done that at the National Association of Counties, I did it at Linn County, I've done it when I've worked other places. There really is an art to managing people and putting a team together. And I would recognize that there are several people that are in the auditor's office that I think are really pretty good. But I think a lot of it is creating an atmosphere where people feel excited about being at work and want to stay at work. And I think you can get a lot more done. So those are things that I think I bring to the office that might be a new perspective.
What other questions do you have?
Kyle?
What's your strategy to get people to vote on June 2nd?
On June 2nd, it's a little bit harder because there's not much on the ballot. There is the one other race on the ballot is the U.S. Senate race. There are 5 people running for U.S. Senate. Human behavior is such that when confronted with too many choices, people tend to go somewhere else because they don't want to make a choice. But I would encourage you to take any opportunities to take a look at those 5 people running on the Democratic side. I'm being rather presumptuous that maybe all the people in the room are Democrats because that's how you vote in a primary. But I am really focused on absentee ballots. The very first time I ran to be a supervisor, I had a primary and I was the only primary ballot at that particular time, and I think there were about 3,800 people in the entire county that voted in that particular election. So I think it might be a little bit higher than that because there is a U.S. Senate race, but I'm being mindful and knowing that it's June 2nd, Memorial Day has just gone by, people are really thinking about vacations, they're not thinking about going to vote. So we're going to be running an ambitious absentee ballot campaign. We do have absentee ballot request forms here. And so we're engaging with folks on that.
So I'm a numbers guy, I'll spin it a different way. So if you say like, hey, there's like 3,000 people that show up for the election, and then you say, all right, well, if you split the vote roughly 50-50, that's 1,500. And then if you only need to scooch it, by a 0.5% to make that work, that's only 15 votes. So if all 15 people here sign up for an absentee ballot, that helps tip the election already. So, in terms of what is likely to be the turnout for the June 2nd primary, especially, people have already done the caucusing and the presidential election isn't until November. So from that mental standpoint, it's not something that's going to be top of mind for a lot of folks. And so if we can drive the absentee ballot, I think that that'll be a really handy way, for it to, appear, if it's the only vote, if you're not voting in the Senate rate, like, hey, vote early and often, that's usually the Democratic side there. So it's like, but it's like if this is the only vote that you have, it's like just get it in the mail and send it off, because
it's engagement.
Yeah.
It's engagement. So, well, thank you all for coming. We very much appreciate it. There's a lot of food there. Definitely take cookies. Appreciate it. Enjoy this lovely day. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.